Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar, What You Can Learn from the Hyper-Relevant CMO. My name is Margaret Lee. I'm the Head of Marketing for the Americas at WARC, an online service offering best practice, insights, and benchmarks from the world's leading brands. We are in the Central family of brands and a sister company of Cannes Lion and MediaLink. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Ana Maria Santos, Managing Director of the US and LatAm, and Nevine El-Warraky, Co-CEO of Brand Learning, which is part of Accenture. We're really excited to have them share results from new research on how pioneering CMOs are transforming their organizations and delivering hyper-relevant customer experiences, which is based on over 1,500 survey responses and interviews. We will have a Q&A after the presentation. Please submit your questions anytime using the comment panel in GoToWebinar or on Twitter using the hashtag #WarcWebinar. Let's get started. Over to you, Ana.
Hi, everyone. As Margaret mentioned, I'm Ana. I'm the current MD for Brand Learning here in the US. And Brand Learning, just to let you know, Brand Learning is as an organization, is a consultancy specialized in building marketing capability and capabilities for growth with global client organizations. We are now part of Accenture. A little bit about me, I started my career in Brazil in marketing. B2B marketing, had a stint in pulp and paper, worked with CPs International in the industrial marketing area. Moved to the UK 22 years ago to do an MBA. There I worked with, again in the marketing area with PricewaterhouseCoopers before moving to Brand Learning 17 years ago. And after a good time there building the business and doing some exciting work, moved to the US to open our practice here. And that's where we are now, currently based in New York City. So over to you, Nevine.
Hi, everyone. It's Nevine. I am the co-CEO of Brand Learning. As Margaret said earlier, I started my working life with Unilever 10 years ago. For 10 years. It's Unilever, not 10 years ago. I'm a lot older than that. And then moved to Racket Bankizer for 3 years. And I've been with Brand Learning about 16 years now, doing very exciting work, as Ana says, globally. Now part of Accenture for the last, coming up to a couple of years, and the research we're sharing with you in a minute is obviously led by us, part of the Accenture team, and hopefully pretty exciting. Hopefully you'll find it quite a useful one to listen to. So back to you, Ana.
Thank you. So we are really, really excited, very pleased that we were invited to share this piece of research with you. We hope this to be a conversation, and we were very excited about some of the findings that we came across. I mean, you can read on the screen, but one of the most exciting, interesting findings that we had this time around, and I mean this time around because we actually ran a survey, a similar survey 3 years ago, and we noticed some changes. This time, we noticed that there is a clear small group of CMOs, whom we are calling pioneering chief marketing officers, that actually stand out from the rest, 83%. And they are distinctive by the fact that they are driving more growth, and that's validated by quantitative analytical methods in the research. And what they are doing differently, and they are actually delivering hyper-relevant customer experiences. We are going to talk a little bit about that later on. And what does that mean? They are delivering customer experiences. They are moving with the times. They are agile. They are dynamic, and they are doing that while also driving internal transformation and making changes in teams and organizations. So it's really focusing on customer whilst also making internal changes. As I mentioned, the hyper-relevance is going to be a theme throughout this conversation. Hyper-relevance is key. And what do we understand by hyper-relevance? We all know, and we have been talking for a while, and that's not a new thing, that customer expectations change. We all know, we have been talking about that for a while, that with technology, things are changing very, very fast. Now, what we do about that, it can be different. You know, sometimes we believe there's a playbook, and then we actually determine what customer experiences we want to deliver, and we just go by the book. Now there's no time for that anymore. We really, with changes in needs and contextual customer experiences changing so fast, marketers need to have the ability to dynamically adapt and change and respond quickly and be hyper relevant, not only online, but also offline, integrating those experiences wherever they may happen. Now, whereas for some that can pose a challenge and be overwhelming, for some CMOs, this poses an incredible opportunity. So we have a quote here, which we actually like a lot, from Mark Evans, CMO for Direct Line. In his opinion, there's not a more exciting time to be a marketer, because with all these new changes, with technology evolving, we have so many more tools, and we can be so much more creative in delivering those hyper-relevant experiences. So depending on the perspective of the CMO, this can be a really amazing opportunity and crossroads for marketers. Now, talking a little bit about the methodology, I think Margaret and Nevine mentioned briefly about that. We did talk to a lot of people. So the survey was responded by just under 1,000 CMOs and just over 500 CEOs as well. So we do have a good perspective, not only from within the function, but also from the CMOs, key stakeholders inside the organizations, which are the CEOs. So we have a good understanding of the expectations of the CMOs and marketers in general. On top of the quantitative survey, we also conducted a number of in-depth discussions with CMOs, with senior marketers, and key opinion leaders and thought leaders within Accenture and outside Accenture. So we could qualify a lot of what we're going to be sharing here with ideas, and that kind of just under the skin, better understanding and insight. It was a global survey, and we had 12 countries represented. And whereas the number of countries may not sound huge, they did represent key markets and represented all the regions on the planet. And we had a very good breadth of industries represented, including CPG, pharmaceuticals, technology, industrial, financial services, life insurance, and so on and so forth. You see that on the screen, and you will have access to the PDF version of this presentation as well, in case you want to refer back to that. Now, one thing that we knew was happening, but actually we got a lot more evidence, is that marketing as a function, or a discipline rather, has been and is going through even more profound and fast-paced shift. Okay, so that change, we know, is being driven by disruptive new competitors. Yeah, there's new competitors coming in all the time. In whichever industry we look at, there are people coming from all directions, right? And that's being driven a lot by the lower cost of entry, accessible technology, the non-existence of risk sometimes, or legacy organizations and platforms that new entrants have to contend with. Nonetheless, we can use that as an excuse, or we can actually use that as a wake-up call for what we do in our current organization. Now, some data to illustrate that. In a survey, 81% of the CMOs agree that what actually is making new entrants very successful in claiming market share, in claiming preference from customers, is actually the customer experience. We have been talking about hyper-relevant customer experiences, and that's really where the differentiation comes from. So let's not forget that. Another 81% of the CMOs agree that the customers, contrary to not a distant future where brand loyalty was one of the key drivers of success, they are saying, okay, yeah, I think brand loyalty and brand purpose is still very important, but customers are becoming more and more open to experiencing different brands and new experiences as well. And finally, 78% of the CMOs agreed that these new entrants, for one reason or another, and some things, other things that we already shared, the ability to try new things without legacy constraints, they are becoming very good at delivering better customer experiences, hyper-relevant customer experiences. And that's giving them the edge. So that's a really great wake-up call to the large organizations and organizations that have been grappling with those legacy systems and organizations. So that's a really, like I said, great wake-up call. Many CMOs are really revving to go and really starting to take that opportunity to shape the future. And 1/3 of the CEOs believe and expect the CMOs to be the individuals or people leading the functions and disciplines in their organizations that will actually claim that purpose of driving growth in the organization. Interestingly enough, as well, on the other hand, and that's another slight challenge, one that CMOs can embrace openly, is that 2 in 3 of the CEOs interviewed and that actually responded to the survey say that they do lack confidence somewhat in their CMOs and their ability to drive growth. And also, a little bit worryingly, but again, bring on the challenge to marketers, they don't believe the next generation of marketers are ready yet to take on the challenge as well. So there is some way to go in actually driving and capturing that change and capturing that ability to drive the hyper relevance. But that's, again, in itself, it brings a great opportunity. So talking a little bit about that small cohort of CMOs that I talked about, the ones we are calling the pioneering CMOs, they represented, validated by the quantitative analysis, 17% of the sample, of the universe. That's around 1 in 6 CMOs. So this small cohort of people are already taking that opportunity to do things differently, to shape the future, to start creating those hyper-relevant relevant experiences. This is a very interesting point for us who actually were involved in the research. Like I mentioned, we did a survey 3 years ago with CMOs as well, a global survey, and at that time, only 3 years ago, that a lot of the CMOs would say, yes, no, we're very confident. We know where the world is going. We understand the changes, and we feel very capable to drive those changes and drive growth. However, at that time, when we dug under the surface, we actually noticed that a lot of those CMOs and senior marketing professionals were somewhat paralyzed by change and all the changes in digital technology, personalization, and so on and so forth. So they actually couldn't really capitalize and maximize the opportunity at that time. Only 3 years down the line, which is now, we see that 11%, if we look at this small cohort, those 17% pioneering CMOs in this survey, if we take their organizations, we notice, we calculated and came to that conclusion that they are delivering, those organizations are delivering 11% better results than the rest of the organizations. They are outperforming the remaining 83% by 11%. That's hugely significant. And like I mentioned, in the last 5 years, 3 years, this is becoming more significant. You know, if we take the consolidated numerical outperforming ratio of 3%, if we take the last 5 years, and then the last 2 years, that outperforming potential to be 6%, and to get to 11% if we take the last year alone, I think it's clear to see that there is really, those pioneering CMOs are really here to stay and really driving some significant value to their organizations. So that's reassuring to see that there is, where there's still a lot of people that are not embracing yet, there is a lot of opportunity. We are very optimistic in seeing and believing that the CMOs can be the engines of growth in the organizations if they change a few things, which Nevine is going to describe. Now, what is the big difference that these guys are driving differently? I think it's very tempted, and we're all marketers, it's very tempting to say, oh, okay, there's more budget, we're throwing more money at the problem. And interestingly enough, that's not the case. We didn't see any evidence whatsoever that pioneering CMOs are spending more money or budgets on marketing activities or innovation, if you like. They are indeed spending differently. They are experimenting, they are exploring the array of new channels available. They are experiencing with different partnerships or constantly experimenting. And they are looking internally as well, as in terms of ways of work. How are we working internally, organizing internally, empowering our teams internally to deliver that? That's really great food for thought. So let's not be tempted only to throw more money. In many ways, the budget constraints drive the innovation in itself. And finally, we are going now, I gave you just a top line overview of the key findings. We're going to move on into Nevine now and really see how the pioneering CMOs are actually looking at their work differently. What in practice those 1 in 6 CMOs are actually driving that is different from the rest. So thank you very much, and over to you, Nevine.
Hi, so Anna's just talked about the fact that those pioneering CMOs are not really spending much more money. They're just spending differently, and they're doing significantly different things internally. There are 3 things broadly that they're doing differently. We're calling them reinventing for the now and the new, and basically they're focusing their energy on innovation within the organization, on disruptive growth, on understanding where that growth is going to come from. They're rejecting a very broken marketing culture in the sense that they are challenging the current ways that, or the accepted wisdom, if you want, in the ways that marketing has performed and operated for many, many years. And they're looking at new ways of doing things. And they are also reorganizing for growth. So looking at their operating model and rewiring it in a way where collaboration is driving quite a lot of their new behavior. So we talk a little bit about what that means in reality, and some of the findings that have come of the research have been really interesting, because as Anna said at the beginning, those pioneering CMOs are recognizing more than their peers that disruptive competitors are having a very negative impact on their business. So people that are coming in, taking sort of a niche look at the market, attacking it. In most industries now, the barriers to entry are quite low. So they're recognizing that these types of competitors can be really detrimental to their business, and therefore they're focusing quite a lot of their energy on disruptive growth. And what we've seen from the research is that those pioneers are looking at now at the current business and how to keep the wheels on the bus going, as one of the CMOs said, as well as reinventing the future. We found out that they're 27% more likely to say than their peers to say that their experience is mainly around being an innovator, and they're looking at technology to provide some of the new and interesting ways in which they can innovate within their business, their brands, their services. They're also 20% more likely to than their peers to be saying that they're spending more than 3/4 of their time on managing disruptive growth. Disruptive growth can come from within the core business, so you're looking forensically at new ways of doing things, or it can come genuinely from looking at a pain point that the customer is having and addressing it differently. So they're spending a significant amount of their time doing that. And therefore they're getting the balance significantly better than some of their peers in terms of looking at the new as well as the now. They're also rejecting a broken marketing culture. And I think some of you might think, but it's not that broken, surely. And I suspect in some cases it really isn't. But what they're doing is that they're challenging the conventional wisdom. They're looking at new ways of doing things. doing things. And what that means is that they are evaluating the culture they're currently operating in. They understand that the state of change, that and flux that we're all operating within over the last few years is not going to go away. And as a matter of fact, one of the quotes that I found quite interesting in the research came from one of the CMOs that said, we are at the slowest pace of technological change at the moment, because in reality, it's only ever going to sort of speed up. And they recognize that. Those pioneering CMOs recognize that, and they are working hard to equip their organization and their teams to be able to change as fast as the customer, the consumer is changing in terms of their expectation. They're also 29% more likely than their peers to be sourcing new capabilities into the business, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. They are 23% more likely to be focused on the people and on developing much more of a customer-centric organization. And the language of customer centricity isn't new. I mean, most organizations will tell you that they're customer-centric. Of course they would. But I think they're looking at new ways to do that. Well, particularly in an environment where maybe you weren't as connected, say, because you have a wholesaler or a retailer in terms of the relationship with the customer. They're looking at new ways where they become genuinely much more customer-centric. They're 20% more likely than their peers to be experimenting with new solutions. And new solutions are not just around products or services. They're actually about new ways of working, new external capabilities. And more importantly, they're 26% more likely than their peers to say that marketing should really own the entirety of the customer record, which is an interesting claim because in most industries, that record tends to be siloed and fragmented and doesn't normally sit in one place. And I know that when we interviewed an insurance company recently, they were telling us that one of the biggest achievements they had in the last year is having one customer record across the piece. If you're buying home insurance, in the past, people didn't know about your medical insurance, which seems rather crazy, but was the case in that case. So I think a definite desire for marketing to own the customer experience, the customer record. And they are looking at the culture and the customer-centered culture, like I said earlier, across multiple dimensions. You can see here that they are performing slightly differently than their peers. Other CMOs that are not genuinely delivering this 11% shareholder value growth, as Anna talked about earlier. So they're buying multi-channel rather than conventional channel. They're reevaluating their choices more, looking into the future significantly more. They're innovating more. They are aware that there is a level of distrust with brands in some cases, and that there has been a lot in the media, in the press, and the public domain around data breaches and various other things. So they manage data a lot more carefully, with a lot more care. They're very aware of the need for transparency, and that how the evolving relationship with customers and consumers now means that authenticity and transparency drives a very big role in that type of relationship. And they know that brands need to stand for something. That purposeful brand tend to get much more traction with customers than ever before. As I said earlier, they're not just focused on building their capability internally. They're sourcing different capabilities, whether internally or externally, when they don't have them. And I think in this research, we've come across several interesting titles or jobs or roles that people are either sourcing internally or sort of bringing in externally. I particularly like the growth hackers, but chief storyteller is also really quite interesting. So I'm not 100% sure what trust leaders do, because this was the quant piece of research, but as you can see, some very interesting titles in terms of what people are bringing into the organization now. The third thing they're doing is definitely re-looking at their operating model and rewiring it fundamentally differently. I think in the past, most of us would acknowledge that marketing and sales have often been a little bit competitive with each other. Certainly in the last few years, the CDO and the CMO haven't always worked as collaboratively as they could. And as for the CFO, in terms of asking for ROI and stuff like that, they haven't always been the best of friends for marketing. What those pioneering CMOs are doing very, very differently is driving a culture of collaboration, genuine culture of collaboration. Again, using some of the qualitative interviews we've looked at, there were several people saying that they have a very close hand-in-glove relationship with their CFO. And fundamentally, they do that by ensuring that they're all working towards a common goal. They're also working within wider ecosystems. They're building in external partnerships as well as internal partnerships. As you can see from this graph, they are connecting significantly more than their peers and who are not part of that group. So they see that some of the C-level relationships that they could develop is going to be critical in terms of driving the future of the organization, how they can deliver that. And as I said earlier, that same level of value-driven collaboration also applies to their external partnership relationships. They're 17% more likely to be expanding beyond the traditional agency partners. I think creative agencies still play a huge part in terms of the trust circle, if you want, with clients, but they're expanding into all sorts of other partners that can be part of delivering the overall growth to the company. They're 18% more likely to be engaged in sort of people that offer digital platforms and look at the role MarTech can play and properly wiring it in. They're genuinely looking at their ecosystem and looking at how they use all the levers at their disposal to drive a considerably stronger growth story. And I think in our view, and based on everything we've heard, marketing does have a clear role to take leadership and drive the future. We've always known that marketeers, when they're performing well, are the creators of value. And we think in this new environment, they certainly remain the creators of new value. They need to be able to adapt with speed and scale. They need to be able to have clear strategies that are driving the value through the experience. And we talk about them about being growth architects. So they need to be sort of orchestrating the organization and the ecosystem of partners to genuinely center around the customer. And I personally really like the quote you've got on the right-hand side. Marketing's core discipline of understanding customer desires and developing ways to make money from that knowledge is crucial. Business undervalue it at their peril. I think it's a pretty powerful insight. So I'm going to hand back over to Anna now, who will tell us a little bit more about how marketing can take that lead role.
Thank you, Nevine. So now I hope that was a really good overview about the key findings and key challenges and the exciting opportunities as well. Now, here in Brand Learning, we have a lot of experience in working with organizations. As I mentioned, we do work with enablement and capability driving. And we have been experiencing some of those opportunities and challenges ourselves with our client work. And we have kind of summarized this whole challenge and opportunity in this slide that you see in front of you here, that marketing now have to really balance that, that duality of driving growth, being the architects of growth, and that's what we are saying here. Marketers have an opportunity, CMOs have the opportunity to be bolder in actually architecting their organizations to drive growth. And that includes defining strategy, defines understanding, using analytics and data, big or small data, to identify value opportunities, growth opportunities in the market. And on the other hand, also working smarter, and that in the aspect of delivering excellent performing, excellent execution of strategies and tactics as well. And we need to also, as we mentioned, because things are changing so fast and it's so important to be focused on hyper relevance to accommodate, to respond to constantly changing customer needs. We need to be very smart to continuously optimize what we do. Now, I find this duality particularly interesting because depending on where we see it on the spectrum, of marketing, we might want to say, oh, maybe strategy is not that important anymore. Let's focus. And with all the technology and the ability that we have to really be in control and optimize and measure nearly everything, we focus on the optimization side of things. That is not true. That's not what we see happening. If we move on the slides, Nevine, to the next one. Let's look a little bit at marketing as the architect of growth. We have observed and we have worked with many companies, and we see that for the optimization to work well, for marketing to work in a smarter way, we need absolutely to remain connected with brand purpose. Brand purpose or organizational purpose continue as relevant, if not more relevant than ever. That's the guide. That's what actually directs our efforts and really shows us where value is going to come from as well. Because otherwise, you're going to have kind of a chaotic execution, right? And for us to be successful in that, and we mentioned data a lot, and data is a big topic. Everything is actually fueled by intelligence and data. But we need marketers have that the need to not only follow what data says blindly, but really be forensic in the way that we interpret data and really are committed to find the new sources of value. Not believing in what happened in the past, but really ask why and remain curious to really interpret the data courageously, and really believe that we can do something about the findings and capitalizing on value sources. As a result, and with the belief that we have identified new sources of value, we have to continuously reinvent the overall customer experience. And a challenge here, but a much needed thing to do, as Nevine explained as well, is we have a duality in managing the business as well. On one hand, we really cannot give up our core. Our core business is what is actually paying the bills, so to speak, is actually what's sustaining the organization. But at the same time, whereas maintaining that core, we need to continuously looking to transform and rotate the business into the new sources of growth. So, it is challenging, but that's what the pioneering CMOs have been doing, have understood and are understanding that the playbook is not necessarily valid anymore. The playbook looks at how we have been doing things successfully yesterday. And we cannot just look at the playbook and expect that to have all the answers. So we need to continuously challenge the certainties that we have, but architecting that and doing that with a purpose. If we move to the other side of the spectrum, looking into the working smarter and working at continuously optimizing our performance. Here is where, again, there are changes, and then we see Nevine and I and our organization are working a lot with clients in this area, which is, yes, planning is still very important, right? And I don't know, I believe we have different levels of experience in our group here today in planning and executing. Planning, until very recently, used to be an annual cycle where people stopped what they were doing and let's really analyze everything ad infinitum and create a super detailed plan to move forward. So I'm not going to say, we're never going to say that planning and having an intentional direction to our activities is not valid. We believe it's really very valid. What needs to happen is that it needs to be agile enough, it needs to be dynamic enough to constantly update. We need to find ways to redirect the course of activity to continuously optimize performance. We have the ability to observe and measure nearly everything, so we need to be able to redirect sooner rather than later our efforts. It is about optimizing performance means continuously experiencing with different experiences, using the whole breadth of omni-channel possibilities, continue being hyper-relevant, focus on being hyper-relevant. Don't assume that what worked yesterday is going to work tomorrow. And really be mindful that with budgets being tight and not necessarily us wanting to or being able to spend more money, how can we actually direct our budgets to the activities that are generating more impact? Okay, so for doing that, if we move on to the next one, I think, and that's going to be the last thing we're going to share in terms of what companies, pioneering CMOs are doing, and in our experience, our clients are moving towards. So both Nevine and I mentioned that we started with brand learning in the capability area, marketing capability area, 16, 17 years ago. And at that time, there were things like, such as the playbooks, there were things as competitive frameworks. And they do still exist, don't get me wrong. But at that time, and until fairly recently, competitive frameworks actually limited themselves to describe skills of things that marketers do. In the last 5 years, more and more, those frameworks, those competency dictionaries, if you like, are bringing more and more and highlighting more and more the need for organizations to focus not only on what we do, but how we work, the behaviors and mindsets that we bring and present into the work we do. So on the left-hand side, we kind of summarized 3 human traits, 3 people traits that we believe are imperative for us to actually drive hyper-relevance. We have to really not forget our ability, the humanity of it all, right? And it sounds obvious, but in a world that is being driven massively by technological advances and the prominence of data, the prominence of machine, we cannot forget that humans are the ones making the decisions, making judgments. So far, things might change, but today we are the ones who can interpret that and understand the human contextual element of where customer experiences happen. And the ability of us to be ingenious, bringing ingenuity into that, being bold in actually creating, not think about all the barriers that we have and risks, but really think what we have with this opportunity, how can we shape that future and organizations. And that can happen at strategic level and execution level. So there's no limit to where we can operate those human traits. And adaptability, that's a little bit more straightforward. Needless to say that many of us sometimes would like some more certainty, but that's part and parcel of where we are right now in our history of humankind. Things are changing and changing fast. And picking our battles and choosing where we're going to play is very, very important. And being able to move with the flow is very, very important. So, so on the right-hand side, we have things that you will have seen in literature. They have been talked a lot about, being creative, being resourceful, not forgetting with the technology that we really have to focus on the human context for things. So, and then if it has a call for action for each one of us, is to really try and develop the experiential mindset, the test and learn, and being bold in working leaders with our teams and our teams with our leaders, and be constantly challenging and offering new ways of doing things. So on that note, I'll pass over to Nevine again, and thank you very much for listening.
So it's very much a summary, guys. So as you've heard, we found this 1 in 6, 17% of CMOs who are doing things differently. They're finding it exciting, albeit a little bit challenging. They are looking at new ways to reinvent the sort of the now and the new. They're looking at their operating models. They're moving faster, quicker. They're excited about the change and accepting that it will only ever speed up. And there is a genuine opportunity for them to be driving the growth of their organization. So as Anna said earlier, this is the sort of research that we do every couple of years. And certainly this time we found it quite exciting. We found that there is a way of moving forward where marketing can genuinely be leading the growth. So that's pretty much it. Thank you. And I think I'm handing back over to Margaret.
Yes, thank you so much, Anna and Nevine. That was terrific. We're going to do a very brief question and answer session. So again, if you haven't already, please submit your questions using the comment panel or questions panel and go to webinar. First question for you is around, is it right for CMOs to spend 75% of their time on disruptive growth?
I think I'll answer this question. I have to say it's a question we've been asked several times before. It's an interesting one. I'm not sure that there is an exact science behind the percentage they should be spending their time on. But assuming that most CMOs have a pretty capable operational team working with them, supporting them, working on the day-to-day, then I do think actually the top of the marketing organization needs to be looking significantly more into the future. Because as always, I'm sure there'll be other members of the team who are making sure that the now is operating as efficiently as possible. So although there is no exact science, I personally think the percentage is a reasonable one.
Great. Do you think CMOs have to respond to unrealistic expectations from CEOs with one hand tied behind their back?
That's interesting. And we have a lot of experience, like I said, with CMOs. I think we always have two choices, right? As people, as professionals. One is actually believe that some of those expectations are unrealistic and be defensive. And the other one is actually to embrace things, really stop and think and really understand, refocus on your purpose as a professional. And for myself, I really believe it's a great opportunity to be the owners of the most valuable thing that an organization can do, which is to drive growth, right? So I believe, yes, it is reasonable to expect. Let's take the hand from behind the back and really use that talent to embrace that change and to really partner with the CEO and understand the expectations and work in partnership to drive and demand the right support as well to drive that. That's a very personal opinion, not necessarily reflecting the research, but that's my direct experience of CMOs.
Got it. Last question for you both, and it's actually a question for Anna. So this person works with many clients who are also moving to strategic think sprints rather than annual planning, staying agile to innovation using a Scrum style sign-off with the leadership team rather than a structured process. Are you also seeing this more commercial approach in your work?
Yes, I am, and I'm going to qualify that. I am seeing a lot of organizations applying agile methodology, we ourselves in Berlin Learning Accenture are driving quite a lot of our work in that manner because we believe it does drive a cross-functional perspective, the variety of perspectives. You actually reach conclusions in a much shorter period of time. The quality of the innovation is better, and stuff like that. Now, so yes, we are seeing a lot of that. What I am seeing as well, and we are seeing a lot as well, is that many organizations let's take agile methodology, if you like, who is actually a methodology that was originated in IT, right, to drive software development, and it's being implanted as is into marketing functions and marketing processes. Now, that I don't believe is the right approach. I think CMOs and people driving those approaches need to actually curate what tools, what approaches in Agile, Scrum, Sprints, whatever you want to call the approach. They're all very similarly based in design thinking. You need to think, again, like marketing, you need to get the right tool for the job to be done. So I would urge caution before everybody starts just jumping on the bandwagon and just blindly using the methodology. Use the methodology for what the methodology can do best in the job to be done. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Well, that's it on the question. Thank you again, Anna and Nevine, for such a terrific session. For the last few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Julia, who works with brands at WARC. She's going to quickly show you how you can find additional best practices in research on WARC.com. And as a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar as well as the presentation slides later this week, or actually probably early next week. And we encourage you to share it with colleagues who couldn't make it today. Again, thank you to Anna, Nevine, and all of you for your participation. Over to Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, Nevine, and Margaret. And if you aren't that familiar with WARC, I know Margaret talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but we are an online research and insight service that's all about saving the world from ineffective advertising. We provide unbiased advice on almost every marketing and advertising issue with a focus on effectiveness. And you can see here on the website all of the topics that we typically cover. And today we did learn about the 3 categories where CMOs are transforming their organizations, which is reinventing for the now and the new, rejecting broken marketing culture, and rewiring operating models for growth. And a WARC client recently told me that she uses WARC to stay cutting edge, to understand what other marketers are doing, and to help grow her business. So as you can see with these broad marketing topics, whether it's a different category, a different country, or these topic areas, you probably want to take a look at marketing management, marketing strategy. Of course, looking across all of these areas, we do provide case studies. So looking at results and KPIs and what's worked, different marketing strategies, emerging trends, POV pieces, research papers, and then even actual data looking at benchmarks and even how other marketers are allocating their budgets across different channels. So you'll see some of that here. But one piece that I thought would be really great for everyone to take a look at is something which is called the Marketer's Toolkit for 2019. So we actually went out and surveyed over 800 marketers to find out what CMOs care most about, and it's a really nice complement to the webinar today. And you may remember that we learned that 81% of CMOs agree that new entrants use customer experience as their key differentiator, and the toolkit touches on how you can exceed with your customer experience efforts. And even agencies agree that 61% of them that customer experience will be most important this year. So definitely take a look at this piece. We do also touch on some other topics, because it's not to say that just customer experience is important, but we obviously learned that today and know that from the toolkit. But you can look at effectiveness in short form video, how brands are in-housing, the diversification of search, and key trends in media. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about the webinar today or about WARC's website and content, and feel free to stay in touch with us through social media, or please feel free to come to the WARC website, request a demo, find out if your organization subscribes, or subscribe to our news. And please feel free to also reach out to Brand Learning at brandlearning.com. Thank you everyone for taking a look at WARC today and learning more about the pioneering CMO, and that concludes today's webinar.